during a sales process, call one is when, so before call two, I would have given them, my clients, the entire strategy. We don't do audits, we don't do any of that stuff. I think it's a waste of time and money of everyone, right? It just is stupid. Like, you companies give you money and time, and then you do a bunch of things, put it into a bunch of tools, and then say that, hey, company comes to you, say, hey, I have a problem. You do an audit and say, yes, you have a problem, right? Like, that's a lot of time wasted.
One, two, three, four.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Optimized Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Vinnick, and today I'm joined by Ishaan Shakunt. He is the founder and CEO of Spear Growth. I can't wait for you to listen to our conversation today, get really in the weeds about AI and how it's going to be impacting marketing agencies as a whole, and how Ishaan is utilizing AI devs to grow out his agency's expertise. It's going to be a really interesting conversation. I hope you enjoy. Ishaan, thanks so much for being on today. How are you doing, man?
Doing extremely well. It's been a great day, week, month. So fingers crossed. Like, but things are great. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been following your LinkedIn post. I saw you post. You're wearing your necklace today, and
Yep.
you have your new glasses. So I love the swag you got going on with your company right now.
Oh yeah. Almost didn't wear the locket, right? The logo locket essentially. But then
Hmm.
I guessed, hey, I just posted about it. I have to wear it, right? Like, I just cannot
Exactly.
not wear it.
Yeah. Good move. Good move. And Ishaan, what time is it for you right now? Because I know, isn't it like super late, right?
It's 9:30, so it's not that late. It's fine. Yeah.
For you, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, for those of you that don't know, Ishaan is in India, and he is super committed to the game. He's working the late nights and the early mornings. So it's such a pleasure to have him on the pod today. We're gonna have some really cool conversations to discuss. So, Sean, I just want to get into it really. We're going to be talking about spear growth. We're going to be talking about cutting edge strategies and tactics you're using to kind of grow your agency as well as your clients, performance.
Mhm.
And so I just want to get started. Can you tell us a little bit about spear growth and your role there, and kind of give us a little bit of background on how the agency got started as well would be cool.
Oh, sure. I think I'll start from the background and then build up to the role today, because I think a lot has changed, right? So, quick background about me. Um, I think the story starts in college, college second semester, which is like year one. I'm a CS grad, right? So I like every other kid in India started doing my computer science degree, jumped into that. Start then on my own. I realized, hey, like I don't know what to do. So I met these amazing people in college that knew what they wanted from life, and I was like, hey, that's not me. So I just started doing anything. So I started with, I think, development, and I got really bad at full stack, but I did know full stack. So I was like, hey, I know some stuff. Some things happened, left that. Then I did, I think, 47 other things or so. I have a list. It was like random stuff, right? Like stuff like we started an NGO, like a unofficial NGO of sorts. Then I opened a lemonade stand, or we did this WhatsApp marketing. Like it was literally anything, right? Like just
Right.
literally anything. That went on for a year. It was an amazing year where I could do anything I wanted. Somehow I got to know about entrepreneurship, and that's when, in at least in India, or at least in my circle, entrepreneurship wasn't cool, and you didn't even know what it meant, right?
Mm.
Like, so in India back then, what's that called? Shark Tank hadn't really come into India. Now India has its own version of Shark Tank. I think after that, entrepreneurship is much cooler. But
Okay.
I wanted to be an entrepreneur without knowing what it meant. I just knew that I'll probably be poor. Like if I start off on my own. So I was completely okay with that. Learned how to. I literally practiced, or sort of morphed my lifestyle into something where I didn't need to, or didn't want to spend a lot. Did that. Decided to. Was sure I would go off on my own. there were two companies, like, so in India you have placements in college, right? So companies come to the college, and in the last year of college, which is the fourth year, companies come and you just sit for placements, you get through companies, and almost all students, at least from like if you are in a tier 2 and above college, you get placed through the college. It's not like you have to go and hunt for a job on your own,
Hmm.
right? So I decided not to sit for placements except for two companies. One was High Radius and second was Deloitte, because they were like non coding companies. Sat in one of them just to like High Radius, which is the first company I joined. Went there, got super lucky, sat for a single interview, got in, got an amazing mentor there, got lucky a bunch of more times, and got to lead SEO before my internship ended. So I was in a year long internship. Before it ended, I got to lead SEO. Year two is when we just scaled like anything, and Hiredis basically got valued over $1 billion as it became
Wow.
a unicorn. I was leading a marketing team, so that was like amazing. I got that entire exposure and all the craziness happens with it. I think I stayed there for a couple of years. Finally decided that hey, I'm not learning anything, so I just quit. I just
Fair.
yeah, I'm
Fair.
like, hey, I'm not learning enough. Quit. Got lucky again. Got into this community called Peak. Now, Peak community is this, or like at least when it started, was just a bunch of CMOs and me. Like,
Okay.
and that's how I,
Yeah.
I describe it. Completely out of place. Got lucky there. Got to learn from CMOs. Got to ask all of my stupid questions. I remember asking a question. Everyone was discussing the best campaigns to run for the year and how to structure teams and all of that. And my question was, what is a campaign? Right?
Oh
Like, I really
wow.
wanted to understand it. So, and I that's when I realized most marketers don't really know the answer to stuff like that. Right? Like, it was everyone just uses the word, but no one knows. So, just learned a ton there. Finally, and I was sure after leaving my job, I was just freelancing, right? Didn't have a plan, left my job, started freelancing and learning. I did not I was earning like any I was earning enough money to sustain myself for a year every single month, and I was working like what, like 4 hours a week or 6 hours a week. It wasn't even a lot, right? So it was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, it was good times, right? So I had a lot of time on my hands to learn. Finally, someone told me, James Gilbert. He told me that hey, I asked him that hey, all of you, I know a lot more marketing than a lot more CMOs here, and that wasn't me being very arrogant. Like, I just like, hey, why do I not am I not being able to say the things with as much confidence as everyone else, right? There's something missing. I don't know what that is, but there's something off. I know all the basics, I know strategy, I know all of this marketing. I've seen results in all of these channels, like what's missing. And he basically told me a CMO is not a marketer, it's a business person who happens to specialize in marketing. So I had two options: either do an MBA or start my own business. I just decided I don't have the patience to do an MBA, so I started my own business the next week.
That's
That's
hilarious.
the long answer of the origin story of me and Spear Growth and all of that. Yep.
Yeah, and I think what's funny too is if, for anyone listening, if you check out your LinkedIn, right, you kind of have that in your bio a little bit about how your boss said you were a pain in the ass, and and it's just because you were like, you were driven, you were putting in the work, you were asking questions, and your boss didn't really want to answer them, I guess, and didn't want to put up with it. So it's like, yeah, rightfully so. Like, I'm glad that you took that step. Did I hear you right when you said that you were making a year's worth, like you could live off of a year's worth of your monthly rate, like before you went like all in with Spear Growth?
Oh yeah, yeah. So two factors, right? One,
Okay, okay.
I got super lucky. I'm a lucky guy, right? So essentially,
Okay, all right.
that's a theme, right? So essentially, I picked up a lot of clients, and once I figured out, and I was already decent at marketing, right? So I basically pitched them that hey, I'll do the work and then just pay me for the results. That was my pitch because it was early day freelancing. I sort of wanted to get a few clients, and then they did extremely well.
Oh
So
wow.
I did extremely well.
Yeah.
So
Hey, that'll
that,
do it.
That plus I didn't have a lot of expenses. I told you I practiced being poor essentially, right? So,
Yeah,
so yeah.
that's great. That's great. Okay,
Hmm.
so great origin story. I think that's really helpful context to kind of talk about like where you're at now. So,
Hmm.
could you kind of describe where Spear Growth is now, and what you guys are specialized in, and what your
Yeah.
objectives are for the rest of this year and going into next year?
So I think now Spear Group is much more mature. We're 3.5 years in. So now we know we do ads and SEO. Those are the only two channels that we do. And we do it for B2B SaaS companies, right? So our sweet spot is working with companies that are, have at least 5 6 people in the marketing team, have PMF, have a budget, have a couple of marketing channels at work, then start with us, right? It's usually the scale part. And then the large, I think our sweet spot is companies that are like not unicorns. Like we have a 4 or 5 unicorn clients, but then I think basically we are anti a lot of, if it takes us a month to get approvals, we won't be able to get stuff done, right? So that's not
Yeah,
the culture and the team we've set. So it's very hard for us to work when the approval cycles take too long. So it's a, the company shouldn't be large enough that we can get approvals in days, not months, right? So that's basically our sweet spot. That's what we figured out now. We are 23 folks at the moment, right? So 22, 23. Uh, and then the last few hires, like another fun fact, the last few hires were actually AI devs. They weren't
oh wow,
marketers. So that's been a fun twist as well in the journey. But yeah, like we've worked with 50, 60 different companies till now, maybe more. Um, been doing great for SEO. I think we're known for getting like MQLs and SQLs within 3 4 months, and everyone else promises like traffic in a year. So we just outright beat them. And then for ads, it's usually just like, hey, we do everything and take own results and just take care of essentially the full funnel, right? The entire stack, all execution, everything, and just give us approvals and we'll get everything else done. That's why people work for us with us. So yeah,
that
that's
is so cool. So, a couple things. We'll talk about the AI devs maybe a little bit later in
yeah,
the
yeah.
pod, but I am very curious about that. But I think something that stands out, right, is that 3.5 years in, 20 plus member team, you guys are killing it. You've decided on an ICP, like that's very clear. You mentioned that you have your clients, their PMF, like they've found product market fit. How are
Mhm.
you clarifying that? Like, how are you finding these clients that know that for sure? And obviously, like you can tell by revenue, right? When you're looking at the revenue, like, oh yeah, like this offer like actually has good conversion rates. Like, oh, we're growing and scaling the
Mhm.
company. But like, how are you getting in with those companies before they decide to maybe even hire an internal marketing team? Because I guess like at that point, right, in a startup, if they find PMF, they're probably looking to get more venture funding so they can accelerate growth, right? So
Mhm.
how are you
Yeah.
kind of like nudging yourself in there and working with them? I'm just curious about that.
So just to clarify, there's two things, right? So one, how do we know someone has PMF, or how are we doing our own marketing? Which is the what specifically are you asking, Ian?
Well, I would say like how are you guys, yeah, I guess you could say how you're doing that marketing. Like how are you getting into these guys' DMs and figuring out that you want to work with them and that they want to work with you too?
So the short answer is mostly inbound, right? So the short answer is LinkedIn, niche communities. We are an inbound agency, so our own SEO ads. It's all out. We do a lot of inbound, and I'm pretty good at networking. So that's
Mm-hmm.
the channel aspect to it. And then the second aspect is the positioning aspect, right? So we're very good at our SEO positioning is just next level. Our ads positioning is not as good, but we're getting there. And then I think we're getting better and better at offers. So I think if those are the three things that contribute, and then obviously when you do good work, you get referrals. But yeah, I mean that's the obvious bit. But then I think those three is as what's driven most of our growth:
Great answer.
positioning,
I mean,
offers, and Inbound channels. Yeah, I can give you a longer answer and exactly what where.
No, I think that's fine. I think like there's not like these cutting edge. I think the thing is like people think that, oh, there's like this one thing that they're doing that's driving all of this success. And it's just not it's just not how it works. I mean, it's combination of strategy, combination of the offer and positioning. So it makes perfect sense to me. And I'm sure it's just something that needs to kind of get drilled into more people's heads is marketing takes a little bit of time. Like as you mentioned with your SEO campaigns, yeah, it's like 4-ish months, but you are starting to drive MQLs from there. So maybe this is a good segue into the next question, which is I'd love to hear a little bit more about that strategy and that tactic of, driving inbound pipeline from SEO in just like under 6 months, really. Like
Yeah.
that is kind of unheard of, right? Like you said, most SEO agencies guarantee traffic, but they don't really guarantee inbound, qualified leads. So I'm curious, like, what does that look like inside of Spear Growth?
So we've, I think, figured out a couple of things really well, right? So, and by the way, it's nothing, it's different, but it's not too advanced, is how you
Okay.
would put it. It's like a bunch of first principles. For example, like you would look at like a typical keyword research. Let's start with keyword research, right? Typical keyword research strategy would basically be go to a tool, put two filters, and then say this is my keyword list. Like do some manual filtering on it, and that's how people do keyword research. Okay, it's fast, it's efficient, but it's not doesn't work, right? And also, second thing when you look at is you publish a bunch of blogs, and there's a lot of conversation around blogs. We don't, right? So it's just like
Yeah.
okay, there's a bunch of things I've seen that doesn't work, and then third major aspect is, I think, getting the work actually done, because a lot of SEO agencies and folks are like, hey, like this is what we need to do, but then no one really does it. And like so if you can get really good at these three things, and just talking about the content side, right, you could very easily drive results, right? So for example, now if I just break that down into getting things done, just means one, setting expectations, and this is the most important part, setting expectations extremely well, right? So during our sales process, call one is when, so before call two, I would have given them, my clients, the entire strategy. We don't do audits, we don't do any of that stuff. I think it's a waste of time and money of everyone, right? It just is stupid. Like you companies give you money and time, and then you do a bunch of things, put it into a bunch of tools, and then say that, hey, company comes to you, say, hey, I have a problem, you do an audit and say, yes, you have a problem, right? Like that's a lot of
It's
time wasted. So we
a
don't
good
do that.
take. I like that take. Okay. Okay. Keep going.
So essentially, call one in sales, and this is an important part in delivery, is essentially, hey, this is exactly the two things you need to do. Let's not do everything. So one is limit the amount of work anyone has to do. Right? So don't tell them to fix 1,236 changes. Right? So don't ask
Yeah.
them to make 56 blogs. Great. So let's just figure out, okay, what are the two things you need to focus on for the quarter? Makes it less overwhelming. The next thing is, that's call one. By call, then the call two happens with every single stakeholder that is involved in execution. So if there's a content team, I want them on the call. If it's a web dev team, I want them on the call. This is before we ever sign the client. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a mandatory step in our sales process. So when everyone is on a call and I just walk them through, hey, this is the spreadsheet you'll see. So that's the second part, right? Like getting very good at creating a roadmap that can actually be followed. So if
Yeah.
you want to change, ask someone to change a header tag, take a screenshot of exactly where the header tag is, what it should be, what it is, all of that. It has to be very clear and easy to implement. So we have very good roadmaps. And then the third thing is when everyone's on a call, we show them the roadmaps and say, hey, would you be able to implement this? And if they say yes, we still ask
Yeah.
how, where will you make time? Do you have other priorities? We just keep pushing. And this is during sales, not after we've signed them. And once we know and all the teams are aligned that yes, we will do it. And if we don't say that, hey, if we cannot get alignment there, we just tell them that, hey, go figure it out amongst yourself and come back if you can actually implement. Otherwise, don't. It's straightforward, right? So those are the three things that help you implement stuff. Similarly, we just figured out, like, we just took every single challenge of the three challenges I mentioned, and we just applied first principles to it and said, okay, in an ideal world, if anything is possible, If I didn't have to care about anything else, just getting good results, what would that look like, right? Like most people won't do this during sales because the sales close rates will go down, right? Most people won't do a lot of things because that's not how sales works or any of that stuff, right? Our
Right.
sales close rates are 60%. Industry averages are 12.
Yeah, that's really high. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, you don't have to follow. It's just like use first principles and then figure out how to get things done. And so we figured out better ways to do keyword research, better ways to sort of do tech, just like, and just the simple stuff, just better ways to figure out, okay, what are the three things you need to do to make sure you get results. Then okay, in an ideal world, how would you do those three things? It's essentially that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you're getting all these quality clients through your pretty in-depth sales process. And I'm sure that the people that are in that process recognize that, hey, like this is a little different than like what most
Yeah.
agencies do. And as a result, they're more committed. And you
Yeah.
can quickly sniff out if they're not. And you don't want
Yeah.
to work with people that aren't because that just makes you look bad. They don't get results. Like that's just not a great relationship.
Oh
So,
yeah, and then we get
yeah.
companies come back that, hey, we spoke 2 years ago. You told me I wasn't ready to do SEO. You were right. I think I'm ready now. Let's work together, right? And there's nothing in the world that can stop that sale, right?
Yeah.
Except me, maybe, right? Like, say you're still not ready, then maybe, yeah, sure,
Yeah.
right? But apart from that, there's nothing else that can stop that sale, right? So it just
That's
goes through.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's so cool to see those referrals. I think that's like for me, I mean, I'm only 6 months in, but what I really get a lot of joy from is someone says, "Oh, I saw one of your LinkedIn posts, or I listened to your podcast and actually really found it useful." So hopefully, I can get to that point where it's like, "Hey, I talked to you 2 years ago, and you said you weren't ready for paid ads."
dude,
You
you're doing
know,
amazing. I think year one, my goal. I told you I started the business basically because someone told me to learn business, so I
yeah,
didn't know anything. My goal was to one of my goals for the year, and this is real, was to understand what departments exist in a business,
hmm
right? Like there is
yeah,
an HR department, sure, but why and what do they do? Like there's a finance department, sure, but what other departments are? That was a literal goal for year one of mine. I was that clueless, right? So you're doing amazing, man. Like just absolutely amazing.
I appreciate that, man. I'm trying. I'm trying. I see big names on LinkedIn like you and Tass and so many other people that we've had on the pod, and I'm like, I'm just trying to be like you guys. So yeah, I appreciate it, man. I really do. And Sean, I'd like to get into the next question. We talked about AI a little bit before, but can you tell me a little bit more about those hires? That it sounds really interesting, and how are you using AI in your agency, and what do you think it's going to do for the rest of the digital marketing industry?
Yeah. So for context, because I think agency owners will also listen to this, right? So
Yes.
um, for context, the way I run my agency is essentially I do one major thing a year, one or two major things a year. And then there's a lot of small things. This is most definitely the major thing for the year.
Sorry for the interruption, but real quick, this podcast is sponsored by Optimize Your Marketing. If you're a B2B tech company running PPC ads, but struggling to see solid return on ad spend, then we're the agency for you. With a mix of first party competitive research, constant AI monitoring of your accounts, visualized A B tests, all wrapped up in your very own dashboard, we're the last PPC agency you'll ever need to work with. If you're interested, reach out today at any one of our various social accounts or visit our website at optimize.marketing to apply. Now, let's get back to the show.
Okay.
Right. So essentially, I like taking a big bet and then making sure I'm funding it well, making sure I'm just going all in and making it, and then just seeing it through, right? And then I'm very, very careful about how I take these bets. And I'll only invest, for example, if I'm investing X amount of, let's say I'm putting in $100,000 towards something, I'll make
Mhm.
sure that I have the money to see it through. I don't have to cut it in the middle. And if I invest that money, the agency won't completely go off track, and it won't just be an existential crisis. So
Yeah.
that's the amount of money I have to invest in these large things, right? So just that's the caveat. So with that caveat, the second thing is this entire AI is coming to the AI pit. Now, I'm not that big of a believer in AI changing the world. Even though I'm investing heavily in it, I'm not.
Okay, interesting, interesting. Okay, okay. So yeah, this will be really cool though to hear what you're doing then. If you don't believe that AI is gonna like change the world, quote unquote.
Yeah, yeah. I think see, it's basically it enables more complex compute. Is so I did a lot of research on this, obviously, before any of your big initiatives. If you make a cup one or two a year, you have to do a lot of research behind them. So my thesis is it's just going to enable more complex compute, which basically means there are a few things that is much easier technically to implement, and so which means a few things which are very hard to automate earlier are much easier to automate now. And the second thing is, because of all of that, the UI becomes simpler, right?
Yeah.
That's it. Right now, if that's it, the beauty of it lies, there's a couple of roles where you could have automated 80% of it, but the 20% was so fragmented across the role that you would still have to do it, which meant you cannot really, and if you to do that stuff you would need to understand the other 80. So you're not really saving all that much time, so you didn't automate it. Now
Hmm.
with AI, when I sort of charted a lot of the roles and I looked at, okay, what is possible, what isn't possible, a lot of work can seriously be automated to an extent that I needed to be automated. So, okay, that was insight one. And I can give examples for what we are automating and all of that stuff as well. The second was, I also have this big bet on how agencies should look like, or like what the future of marketing is, and how few roles may or may not even require to be full-time roles ever. Just basis of all of that, right? I decided that, hey, if someone had to automate all of this, sorry. And then the third thing, major insight, was AI is going to increase productivity to a point where the benefit of a large team goes away to a large extent, right? So if these things are true, then why would I want to hire a lot of people when I could just automate a bunch of things, pay my team just extremely high salaries, and
Hmm.
just make sure I have the best people ever. So anytime, let's say if I automate 60% of someone's tasks, give them a 30% bonus, I keep additional 30 to automate more stuff. They're happy, we're happy, our clients are happy, everyone's basically, like doing well. So that's essentially our, like, the thesis. We'll find out whether or not it works in a year.
That's so cool. And yes, it's a great one. I like again with your background, you take this why approach. You need to understand the why behind all these things. And I think a lot of people, like you said, especially in marketing, like they didn't know what a campaign necessarily even was. And
Yep.
like for you, you're like taking a step back and you're like, what is AI? Like, why is it useful? And like you said, I think productivity, it's a big one, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
AI is not going to come in and like make those traditionally human made decisions. It's really just going to like help you analyze data faster, help you
Yep.
be more productive, and that just increases throughput and potentially revenue for the
Yeah,
business
yeah,
too.
yeah.
So great analysis. And I love that you're just like, hey, like let's just get two people on the team. Let's have them get like a serious marketing background, understand everything we're doing. Like their job is to just automate the crap that like
Yep.
people hate doing anyway. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah, exactly.
such a
Yeah.
cool way to use AI.
I mean, you could use tools, but that is half-assing it, right? And if it's one of the two major projects, I might as well full asset, so to speak.
Sure, sure. I think I think especially, yeah, like you said, you could use tools, right? Like, but those tools are going to charge a premium to use their service anyway, right? And like, if you're able to build something internally using AI and potentially like no code
Mhm.
automations or coded automations even too. I mean, in your sense, like you have that code
Mhm.
background and you know who to hire for that stuff. So why not, right? You'll save a lot of money and it could turn into something proprietary that you could sell or offer to your clients anyway. So it's like
Yeah,
you're setting
I'm
yourself up.
pretty sure I'm not saving money in year one or two. I think it's going to be more expensive. Even if I break even on this investment by the end of year one, I'm very happy. Like, that's
Mhm.
success for me. So I'm definitely not saving money. Yeah, but I think there's a lot of capabilities that no one has built yet, and I don't want to wait. So I just build it. essentially, right? And then we could just give it away, right? I'm not. Yeah, we'll figure that piece out. Yeah,
That's awesome. Yeah, you don't have to have it all figured out yet. Like,
yeah,
see what you got first before you decide, like, oh, this is
yeah.
what we're going to do a year from now or 2 years from now. Like,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
just like one step at a time. So that's really cool. Sean, let's get into the next question, which is like overrated strategies in 2024. So we have obviously we talked about AI, and you kind of talked to you don't believe AI is going to change the world. So is there anything else like overrated right now that you feel like, maybe agency owners or even just like marketing professionals, CMOs, like they're over indexed on, and you think that there's going to be like a correction in the next like year or so, and people are going to realize like that was a waste of time? Like, what do you think?
Oh, there's so much.
Okay, this is good then. Let's hear it all.
I think the one that I'm most interested in, or I'm working most closely with, obviously there's the entire automation bit, but then I think one more thing that we're working very closely with is creating better offers and what that enables, right? So I think a lot of people look at positioning and say that, hey, you need better positioning. Offers is very, very similar, like extremely, extremely similar. I think there's going to be a time where suddenly people start just thinking a lot more about offers, and that's like a prediction. I know B2B SaaS, so in I think next year or so, you'll see a lot more influencers just talk about offers all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the reason is we've seen a difference in performance of any marketing activity across. I don't care about the channel; it's going to be better if you have a great offer, right? It's just a very hard skill to master. Like I think six people or so in my team. I gifted them all a great book on offers. They all read it. We all read it. We all tried making offers, and all of us failed. So it's just like a tough skill, but once you get it, once so now we have our own systems to make offers, and we have our own checklist on what a good offer is and all of that. Once you get it, like our best outbound campaign right now has a 13% positive reply rate, and it can be scaled. The copy, there's almost no personalization apart from the name. So all of that stuff you can remove, right? Like, and this outbound, right? People say outbound is that I'm not even good at outbound, but that offer works,
Yeah.
right? So that's an interesting one that I think people aren't paying attention to, but then
Mm-hmm.
are trying to just make it work, and then everything against it, right? A lot of things are related. For example, just more SDRs, and that a lot of people already talk about that, just over hiring SDRs, overdoing outbound. I think personalization is another big one because I already touched upon it. Like people just like if I in an ad or in an email I told you where your kid goes to school, you would report me to the police, not buy from me, right? Like
Yeah, of course.
it's not useful. I just think personalization is becoming like, because it's possible now, people are overly investing in that, whereas what's much more useful is, hey, does this person need what I do? And
Yeah.
if you can build your list based on needs versus personalization, it's the same amount of work, man. Just work on the needs, and if someone needs you, then sell to them, and then everything else, it just sounds obvious,
Yeah.
right? Like doesn't matter what I call you and how I start the sentence if I'm giving you what you need. The
Exactly.
sale goes easier, marketing goes easier, everything is easier. I think the personalization is another big one. It just like I don't get it. Maybe someone's doing it well. I just haven't seen, like, no matter how much you personalize, it hasn't been that big of a difference. For example, I tried using the name of the CEO. I've tried using, I haven't, like, if I'm reaching out to someone, I name drop the CEO in the email. I've tried that, didn't make that big of a difference compared to a need, right? Then I've seen people talk about, hey, buying donuts from the closest donut store. Okay, I mean, that's interesting. You did your research, but then if I don't want what you are giving, I'll just laugh and giggle and be like, hey, great job, man. But then won't really, I don't know. So that's just
Yeah.
my take on personalization. I think that's another big one, right? So yeah, that's
Yeah.
just a few things that's from top of my mind, but there's a bunch of things people are getting wrong today. Yeah.
I have seen that a lot more in the LinkedIn feed. So a lot of big names like CEOs of like, copy AI and even like Adam Robinson, which I think he was on your podcast.
Yep. Yep.
Um, Big name now. He's growing like crazy. But what's interesting is you're right. It's if I start my email and I say, hey Bob, I
Hmm.
checked out like Wonderworks, and it looks like you serve these clients, and then I say, do you need ads in SEO? Like, obviously I don't say it like that, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's like, it just like it feels like that first sentence, like although it's personalized and you may be able to get it to a point where AI has this great prompt where it is pretty templatized, and it seems like, yeah, okay, like you did your research. Like you said, it doesn't really add anything
Yep.
to the email, because at the end of the day, like you want them to either like take action on like starting a discovery process for your services, or tell you that they're not interested or not respond. Like that's it. There's nothing else that's needed in that email.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I
Yeah.
have nothing to. That's just something that I think a lot of people are optimizing for, where I don't think it needs optimization whatsoever. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm curious to see what happens with softwares like Clay, because Clay is like one of those big ones, right? That is allowing for that kind of AI personalization.
Mhm.
But like you said, like, and I think as more people realize this and test, I mean, you've got the numbers to back up your reasoning here, whereas like some people are just like really bullish on it, but they don't have the numbers to actually back up the point of like, hey, this either works or it doesn't. It doesn't really affect like our revenue. So really cool take, definitely a good one. I think that'll be an interesting one to see what other people
I
feel
think
like
we,
too.
we we just hosted Clay's, I think, first or second event in India. So we
Oh
were the
wow,
partners that got them to host it here, and that it was like a great event. A lot of people showed up. So I'm actually a fan of Clay. Love the software. We use it for our clients, not for outbound, but for a lot of like ad optimizations and SEO CRO optimizations, building better lists. That's stuff that we use Clay for. So Clay is good. I'm just curious to see what they'll do. They raised at a very, very high valuation for what the software is. I'm hoping they figure out some way to raise the next three rounds. I don't know how they will, but just looking forward to it, I guess.
that
Yeah.
Yeah, we won't necessarily go into how you're using Clay for SEO, but I'm curious, like maybe that'll be a future,
Yeah,
post
yeah.
we'll see on your LinkedIn or something, because that is kind of something that I think a lot of marketers don't understand, is that they can use Clay for inbound, not just outbound as
Oh
well.
yeah,
So,
it's a Google Sheet with APIs.
yeah.
You can use it for like the entire outbound positioning is new. Like I saw Clay's homepage before they focus on outbound. Outbound is one use case that Clay enables, and if you look at their older versions of their homepage, that's when I was checking out Clay. They don't talk about outbound as much. Outbound is one thing, and then they realized, by the way, genius move by them. They realized if we just talk about outbound and forget about everything else, because that's all people seem to be using us for, let's just talk about that. And that was amazing positioning by them. But then like that doesn't take away from the fact that their tool can do a lot more, many things, and
Yeah.
maybe some of those other things are as useful, if not more useful, than outbound. So yeah, that's
I love that. That is a really cool insight. I didn't even know that, because I'm kind of new to Clay, honestly. The past like 5 months, I've heard about them. So
oh, well.
really cool insight.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, Sean, last question for you today.
Mhm.
I wanted to hear some parting advice for our budding entrepreneurs and people that are looking to get started with an agency, or maybe they're a few months into their agency, maybe they're like me, only 6 months in. What kind of advice would you give to those people that are thinking about starting and becoming an entrepreneur?
Do you want the long answer or the short answer?
Let's hear both. If the short answer is like truly short, let's hear the short one, and then let's get into maybe a little deeper. I'll ask a question afterwards.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So for most people, like, you shouldn't probably do it, right? So Just for context, you don't make nearly as much money as you think, right? Like just, and if you're doing it for money, don't do it. If you're doing it for freedom, don't do it. It takes away most of your freedom, right? So make sure you have a good reason to do it apart from money and freedom, because you aren't getting that. At least for the next 5 years, you're not, right? So Ian, I'm sure you'll relate to this, but year one you make lesser than you, much lesser. Year two you make lesser. Year three maybe it starts catching up, but if you're doing well, but you don't make enough money, right? You'll probably see you'll see the same thing, right
I
now.
agree. I agree. Yeah. I mean, hey, like you got some dark days. Some like when you're an entrepreneur, you have some dark days. You're like, wow, my friend is over here. Like when I left the company, he was like the same level as me, making the same money as me.
Yeah.
I left the company and like I'm making like two times less, and now he's making like maybe 50% more. Like, yeah, you got some dark days where you're like, wow, like that's crazy. But is there a flip side to this? Let's hear the flip side. Is there a positive to the entrepreneurship?
No flip side, right? Like I just think that most people should not do it. It's not a great way. Like for most people, it's not a great way to live life, right? So I think the origin stories of people are always very interesting, and then you almost never you have to. There's very few people who stay in it for money, right? So for example, for me, I fell in love with the B2B SaaS. I started it because I someone told me, hey, learn business. And I said, I don't want to spend 3 years, 1 year prepping for MBA, 2 years doing an MBA, and then getting like it just seemed very inefficient to me. So I would rather start a business without
Yeah.
knowing how to. That's just me. So that's how I got started. Year at the end of year one, starting of year two, our vision of the company started forming. And our vision truly today, and that's how a lot of the decisions we take now, that's the filter we take every decision through now, is I fall in love with the B2B SaaS space, and I genuinely want to change the way marketers are there. That's why when you ask me, hey, what do people over index on, I'm like, there's too much, right? It's
Yeah.
hard to hire here. It's very hard to like find even to take good decisions. A lot of it because of the exec itself or the team or the data they're getting, or there's so much crap in this space that I just like, hey, I like this industry too much to let this remain in the state it is. So by 2030, so our vision has a time limit. By 2030, I'm going to change the industry. And the way we are doing it is we just sort of, for example, I'll figure out a net new role. For example, we have a role called com strategist in copywriting. That was a role we figured out that, hey, unless you have that role, you cannot create the best copy, you cannot create offers, you cannot create funnels, you cannot create all of these things. That role is missing today. So let's create that role, create SOPs for it, create training for it, create JDs for it. Then let's get 100 companies to adopt that role. And when these 100 companies, or most of these 100 companies, start doing a better job than everyone
Mhm.
else will adopt it on its own. Same with our
That's
SEO
awesome.
processes, same with our ads processes. I just like we'll identify things that we want adopted in the industry and then just bring that into existence essentially. Right? So that's how we're thinking of achieving that, and that drives me much more than most other things. So yeah, like that's like yeah, most for most people you shouldn't do it unless you
Yeah.
are crazy enough to do, have a very weird motivation like this. Is like my genuine advice. Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people would say that. I think a lot of people say they get into entrepreneurship because they want to learn or they want to have freedom and time freedom, but I've kind of noticed the same thing. You really don't have any more time freedom. You have way less
Yeah.
because you can't it's really hard to turn off. Like it's really hard to turn your brain off like when you're thinking about the business. Like you're like thinking 5, 10, 15 steps ahead even when you're sleeping in the middle of the night, you get up in the morning, you're brushing your teeth, taking a shower, like you're thinking about it. You can't just think about like, oh, I'm really excited for the football game that's going to be on later.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like those. I have way less of those thoughts than I did when I
Yeah.
worked full time, like for someone else.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
I think what keeps me sane. I'll show you this. This is my desk. So these essentially are post-its. This is just like our company vision. This is my personal vision for the year. And I
Hmm.
have 12 goals each year, right? Now,
Yeah.
what that allows for is I have goals for my health, my relationship, like just me as a person, friends, family, my own finances, like a lot of different things. So what and it's all I'm here working all the time, so I can just look towards the right and I can read them.
Hmm.
So that's a good reminder of, hey, you have other things in your life, like some things you don't forget, but others you do, or you just miss
Yeah.
out, and a year later, like, hey, shit, I forgot about that. Right? Like, so yeah, these things help. Like, so build your own systems around your life, and your entirety of year one is literally just figuring out. I think at least for most people I've seen it, just figuring out how do I live my life,
Hmm.
what do my relationships look like, what do people around me think, who I want around me. That's year one, right? Year one is not PMF, year one is not like, yeah, all of that exists, right? But I'm talking about year one of entrepreneurship, not year one of your business, right? Year one of entrepreneurship is figuring out life, you know
Exactly.
so that's another thing people don't really understand, and I for sure didn't. Yeah, that's
And how
another,
could
I
you?
think, interesting one.
And
Yeah.
how could you know, right? Like,
Oh
how
yeah.
could you know? There's nothing that prepares you for entrepreneurship.
Oh
Everyone's
yeah.
entrepreneurship journey is different. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's awesome, Ashan. Great conversation. That's all I have for you today, man. But I think this episode, great. Just in general, I think there's a lot of takes that most marketing professionals we've had on have not taken and they haven't talked about. So this is truly unique, and I feel like I learned a lot. So I'm sure our listeners did too.
Thank you so much, man. Like, this was your questions were really good, and again, like, you're already killing it, dude. Like, I hadn't had anything. I hadn't. There was nothing I had figured out by the, like, month 6, month 7, right? So I think I almost crashed the company by month 9. So,
Sounds about right. I feel like I've almost done that a couple times too already. So that sounds about right, man.
but yeah, like, you're doing really well, man. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast and asking such great questions. Yeah.
Absolutely. And before we finish up, Ashan, could you tell the listeners how to get in touch with you if they'd like to work with you?
Oh yeah, just search for me on LinkedIn, I guess, right? Just search for Ishaan Shakunt, or you can look for Spear Growth, which is SPEARGROWTH, speargrowth.com. Just hit us up, maybe see if you're a good fit, let's chat. And if you're not, I would at least be happy to help you out in however I can, right? Just send me a message.
Awesome. All right, Ashan. Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much again.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks again.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to the Optimize Your Marketing Podcast. If you ever want to be a guest on the show, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can search Ian Binnick and you'll find me, or you can fill out the form on our website. Hopefully, you enjoyed today's episode. And if you did, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating. We post episodes like this every single week. So if you're interested, we would love for you to follow along on our Spotify or on our YouTube. Until next week, I'll see you then.